Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. It's Leslie Sandberg, and I am Government Affairs Director for the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you all again for coming today. And we're just going to go ahead and start the presentation. And here we go. The first today. To give you an idea of the process for the decision making that we make here at the Realtors, we have a public policy guide. It's a catalog of broad issues that occur frequently related to issues that we monitor. And to create the public policy guide, basically the public policy committee that we have at our association, we look at different things. We advise and recommend a course of action and specific items. And once we take a public policy stand, we then send it to our board of directors, and they have the final approval over the policy guide. So what you're seeing today are issues that are in sync with our public policy guide. This again, just want to reiterate, this is what we're monitoring: housing projects and funding, wastewater and water quality, short-term rentals, and zoning reform. We do climate resiliency. From what I could see, there wasn't a lot that was done on it for town meetings this year. So that's why I just wanted to give you an overview of what the majority of the articles you're going to see today will be on the topics. And then today, we have a long slip presentation, but we did not cover everything today. And these are the reasons. Provincetown and Falmouth will not be in there because they held town meetings on April 6th. For our members, we had sent out memos on the town meeting articles to the members that live or work in either Provincetown and Falmouth. We did that prior to the town meeting on April 6th. We did the same thing for the town meetings held on the Vineyard. And so Edgartown, Oak Bluffs, and West Tisbury, the members had received information on those towns. Truro today, unfortunately, the town warrant is not yet available. It'll be available May 1st. So we're going to email a memo on articles to the Outer Cape members prior to town meeting. Happy to share that with Stephanie if the builders are interested in looking at that. Barnstable, you will not see. It may be a big player in the region, but they don't hold a town meeting because they're a town council form of government. And then for people who are interested in the Vineyard, Aquina, Chilmark, and Tisbury, we're going to email memos on those articles to Martha's Vineyard members prior to their meetings that will have not yet aired, but will be coming up soon. Let's see. So let's get into it. First one is Yarmouth, the Yarmouth town meeting. And I got to move something down. My Zoom is in the way. My Zoom, there we go. Okay. The Yarmouth town meeting is April 28th. And it's going to be at the DY Intermediate School at 6 p.m. Their first article that we're going to focus on is it's a housekeeping article. It's wastewater enterprise funding. We like to let our members know what they're doing and the money that towns are putting into the wastewater system. So town voters are going to be asked to transfer $513,819 for the operating budget. And this budget is funded entirely from the wastewater stabilization fund that's there. Then we go on to the next article, Article 17. Septic equalization tank rehabilitation. Now, this is something that is a lot of money, so it's a 2/3 majority vote here. They're asking town voters to appropriate $2.8 million for the rehabilitation of their equalization tank. And this is very important because the tank holds the raw septic before it enters the treatment facility. And as we can see here, raw sewage creates a highly corrosive environment that has resulted in failure of the concrete roof and sidewalls of the two tanks. So this money is very direly needed, and we support this. We do not want to have complete failure of the structures in Yarmouth. And here we go, the 19th. And while they're doing their wastewater plans, they have been looking for different places to effluent discharge. And so this is they've identified Bayberry Hill golf course area, and they're asking voters to raise, appropriate, or transfer from available funds the amount of 1.5 million to analyze, engineer, and create final plans and specifications for an effluent discharge at the Bayberry Hills golf course. They basically had done a determination that the golf course provided the best location for additional effluent disposal. So this is for planning, design of recharge areas, irrigation ponds, piping, and pumping systems associated with that process. And then for Yarmouth, we've got here. What we're focusing on is funding for housing, as we said, and a major source of funding that I think sometimes we've forgotten about. And at CCIAOR, we're now looking at really revisiting this, is the Community Preservation Act. The Community Preservation Act, all towns opted into it. It was something that occurred the last time there was a real estate transfer fee push. It was actually the Community Preservation Act was the compromise that came out of it. And this is money that actually all the towns on the Cape are have opted into and adopted the Community Preservation Act. Most towns levy a 3% tax. I think there's two, Bourne and perhaps Sandwich, that are now down to 2%. But the bottom line is this is money that is levied to all property tax payers. That money comes in every year. There's an amount of money go. And if you look at your tax bill, you'll see the tax rate. And then right under it, you'll see a little spot for the Community Preservation Act. That money then comes back to the town, but also the state actually has a trust fund, and it also gives a certain amount of money. There's a formula that they have to add to the local surcharge. And so money is coming back to them. This right now is for FY 2027. Basically, it's what the towns are going to go in. Yarmouth's the first town we're going to talk about, but you'll see this in every town. Want to also remind you too that the money that's coming in, there is a requirement by law that the minimum annual requirements that a town has to do with their Preservation Act money is 10% to housing, 10% to open space recreation, 10% to historic preservation, with an additional 70% that goes into an undesignated fund to be used in any of the categories of the three that were just described. So for 2027 in Yarmouth, their revenues are estimated at 2.2 million. So the distribution, the equal distribution of 10, 10, and 10 will be a total dollar amount of $225,682 to each of the three categories. And here we go. Now, that's the distribution they get. They also have money, obviously, that they're bringing in more money than they're going to distribute to those three categories. So here are some requests that the town wants. The Community Preservation Act is asking the town voters to approve. They want to put in $200,000 in the Yarmouth Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. There's Hands of Hope, which is a local nonprofit that helps with rental assistance and eviction prevention. They want to appropriate $95,000 to it. Habitat for Humanity. They've got a Wood Road Community Housing Project at $240,000. And then also they're going to send this, and you'll also see this too, they're sending it to a neighboring town, the Harwich Ecumenical Council for Housing. It's a housing emergency loan program, again, to help people stay in their homes. And that is at $360,000. So that's what they're asking town to do for that. And now that's Eastham. I mean, that was Yarmouth. Now we're at Eastham. They're having their town meeting May 4th. It's going to be at the Nauset Regional High School at 5:30 p.m. Article 2C, they've got a water enterprise fund operating budget. They have just over $1 million to operate their enterprise fund for fiscal year 2027. Now, you're going to see Article 4A, there's a lot of items underneath because it turns out the way towns do a lot of different things with how they distribute their free cash. For Truro, they have an article, and then they've got a bunch of, I'm sorry, Eastham, they've got a article for 4A, and then you're going to see a bunch of items that they want to fund. The ones that are in particular interest to us is, first one is item B. They're asking town voters to transfer $500,000 from free cash. It'll go to the wastewater stabilization fund. And that was this free cash was generated from short-term rental revenues. And this will help with the funding and the startup costs in Eastham's wastewater plan. And we have a couple more items here on this next slide, Article 4A. They want to transfer revenue to Residential Taxpayer Assistance Fund. Eastham has a resident taxpayer assistance funds that they've created. So they're asking the voters to transfer $50,000 from free cash to that fund. And it's the second year that they've had this fund, and it's to provide financial relief to residents in need. Article 4A, item G, is transfer revenue to fund housing programs. They're asking for $500,000 for free cash to fund housing programs. And it's going to help current housing programs, and it's going to build reserves to seed future development. And here's that 4A. The last item is for PFAS monitoring. They're going to ask for a transfer of 150,000 for PFAS monitoring. A lot of towns that have wells are now looking at PFAS monitoring. I know that it's happening, and it's been happening for a while, the monitoring and cleanup in the Mid Cape, but now the Outer Cape is also looking at it, and they're going to do additional testing and monitoring, and then whatever they need to do, they'll create remediation, including municipal water connections. Now to the next Article 4B. They want to establish a municipal water infrastructure investment fund. This fund would pay the debt service cost of implementing the town's wastewater plans. Last year at town meeting, they passed a $170 million appropriation for their phase one of their wastewater for their wastewater treatment plant. So this will help pay for it. Would be a 1.25% property tax surcharge, and it'll be levied across the board, much like the Community Preservation Act surcharge that we talked about. So the adoption of this fund would require a majority vote at town meeting, not town election. So not only do you have to pass it at town meeting, but you're going to have to pass it at town election. And since the town election it's not in time, they're going to put it on the November ballot. So there you go with that, looking for different ways to fund things. And here they were doing the investment fund. Here is the supplemental funding. This is a very interesting article. The reason why is, again, last year they passed $170 million appropriation, and they needed to do that. But this is a placeholder. So there's no money that is tied to it, but they're asking town voters to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow any sum of money to help pay for phase one of their treatment facility, their collection, their conveyance, and effluent disposal system, and associated pumping stations. The reason being is that this is their insurance policy, because you hope when you do an appropriation that the dollar amount stays where it is or is less. But given the fact of how things are in the global market and things are going up, they're passing this so that they have an insurance policy in case some costs go up, and it's going to be more than 170 million. So I'm interested to see what happens. This needs a 2/3 majority vote of the town body, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. This is something that you've seen before in our webinars. There's a law called the HERO Act, and it's basically for veterans exemptions on property taxes, and they would like to adopt that here in Eastham. Basically, it's based on a cost of living adjustment determined by the Department of Revenue, based on the consumer price index. And basically, and if this goes through, it'll be ready to implement on July 1st, 2026. It'll be helpful because the town already provides about 83, right now the town provides about 83,000 in annual veteran exemptions to 59 veterans, and this would just help provide further exemptions for those who served our country. Now, here they have a home rule petition. Just to refresh everybody's memory about a home rule petition is a specific article that you're saying, a town is saying, we have a problem that is unique to our town, and we want to be able to solve it in this regard, and it's only for our town. And so they pass it at town meeting, and if it passes, it goes to the legislature. And if it's passed, then the town will be able to implement what the home rule petition has asked for. This is something that is with the residential tax exemption. A lot of towns on the Outer Cape, many towns, and those towns usually have more second home housing inventory than they do year-round residential inventory. So the bottom line is that the residential tax exemption is a tool that has been used by towns to help create a tax break for people that live in their town year-round. Provincetown has it, Truro has it, Wellfleet has it, Eastham has it. They have it at 3%. You can go as high as 35%, and if you're a seasonal community, you can go high as 50%. So it's just, again, it's a tool to use it. But what they're looking at now is they're saying they'd like to expand the residential tax exemption to cover properties that are used as year-round housing. This is a way to try to get people who are renting their houses whether they have considered already renting their houses year round to get a tax break, or perhaps if they would consider pairing it with their lease to locals, which is a program that Eastham has to provide incentives to convert short-term rentals to year-round rentals. You can also then not only have that subsidy, but you could also qualify for year-round the residential tax exemption. So it's basically it would be a break of about $150 for a median valued property. Again, it's just another tool to help year-round housing. Article 7A and 7B, I put them together because they are both annual Community Preservation Act distributions. Eastham is getting a little over $1.4 million for their for FY 2027. They're going to ask voters to appropriate $432,022 for community housing. I always love it when they get specific down to the $22. Again, what's different here, we talked about the minimum requirement is 10% to housing, 10% to open space recreation, and 10% to historic. But you can also change those. And Eastham, their housing distribution is 30%. So they've gone ahead and increased how much money they put for housing. They're also going to ask voters to appropriate $20,000 for the Lower Cape Housing Institute. This is something that the Community Development Partnership offers, and they ask the 8 towns that they serve on the Outer and Lower Cape to provide funding. And this is an annual appropriation that occurs. Okay, here we're coming to zoning bylaw, and it's an inclusionary zoning bylaw that Eastham has. To amend this, they're going to need a 2/3 majority. What's happening with this, just to remind everybody, inclusionary zoning requires developers to provide a percentage of new units at below market rates for income qualified households. So if you're going to build a development with market rate housing, if the town has an inclusionary zoning bylaw, you also have to have a portion of that be affordable housing units. In Eastham, their inclusionary percentage is 20%. This article, though, is going to the amendments. They're going to maintain the current bylaw's commitment to affordable and workhouse housing. But what they want to be able to do is have flexibility for smaller scale projects. They may want some smaller scale projects, and they may want to have, and they're going to want to have inclusionary affordable units. But the 20% may be too much of a burden, and it may force a developer not to build a smaller project. So therefore, they want to have some flexibility. And so again, this will be something interesting to see how it goes on the floor. But they're trying again to figure out ways to handle large scale housing, but also the smaller scale housing projects in their community. We're at Brewster now. They're at May 4th. By the way, there's 6 towns having their annual town meetings on May 4th. Theirs is going to be at the Stony Brook Elementary School at 6 p.m. As we see with all of them, here's the enterprise fund operating budget for Brewster. It's a little over $3.1 million to operate that. Again, we care about water quality, so it's good to see that towns are investing in their water departments. For Article 11, we have Community Preservation Act FY 27 annual distributions. So they received about $1.7 million, Brewster, for their CPA distribution for the year. They're going to ask town voters to distribute the following: $550,000 to the Brewster Affordable Housing Trust, $20,000 to the Lower Cape Housing Institute, and $105,000 to Housing Assistance Corporation for a Hyannis shelter. This is again something to say that the Housing Assistance Corporation has asked many towns in the region if they would consider a Community Preservation Act distribution to them because they're creating a regional emergency shelter in Hyannis, and Brewster is one of the towns that has decided to help with that. So here they have some capital and spending projects expenditures. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in Article 13, this has to do with short-term rental properties. They're asking for $60,000 from free cash to get professional services and costs for developing and maintaining registration and inspection program for short-term rental properties. Basically, they're hiring a vendor. Other towns have done it, and it's done to actually provide, it actually scrubs a lot of the online platforms to find out how many short-term rentals you actually have in your town. If towns use Department of Revenue information as to the number of short-term rentals, that's usually not accurate because if you have one property and it's on Airbnb, it's on VRBO, it's on We Need a Vacation, it gets counted three times. This short, this software actually scrubs it. And in Provincetown, for instance, I'm a select board member there. We thought we had about 1,600. Once we had this software, we found out we had 890. So Brewster is going down this road, and it's an easy way to go about finding out what is the universe of your short-term rental, the number of your short-term rentals. So that's Article 13. Article 26, everybody is probably pretty familiar with. There's a seasonal communities designation that has occurred from the Affordable Homes Act. That was something that Senator Sear put into the law, and what it is, it's designing. It's a designation that a town must accept by their town meeting body. And in accepting that, they basically have housing tools that are unique to our situation down here on Cape Cod. We have a expanding population during the season. We have very high home prices. We have people that live and work in our towns that can't afford housing. So this has some tools that if you see, you can develop year-round housing for essential municipal employees and not run afoul of fair housing. You can create year-round housing trusts without a home rule petition, so that actually will expedite that. Those year-round housing trusts are in addition to affordable housing trusts, and these housing trusts are more for the missing middle, so it's 80% AMI to about 240 AMI. A town can purchase year-round deed restrictions, and then you can adopt zoning bylaws that support smaller, more affordable housing options, such as tiny homes. And if the town accepts this designation, it opens the door to dedicated state resources and assistance tailored to Brewster's needs. And I live in a seasonal community designated town, and our town received money at the end of the year. And then all the towns that were seasonal communities did get money, and the average dollar amount from the state grant was about $170,000 that was received at the end of the year. Brewster, this time around, is actually voting on it, and Dennis is voting on it. Currently, the seasonal communities that they would be joining, if they accept it, would be Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham, Chatham, and Falmouth, which just passed their seasonal community designation and accepted it in on their April 6th meeting. Okay. Short-term rental regulations and inspections. This is Brewster is taking a look at this and want to pass this article. And this is basically is creating a general legislative framework to regulate short-term rental operations in the town. Basically, if approved, the select board will draft regulations. More detailed requirements such as occupancy limits, application procedures, fees, and enforcement provisions would be established through the regulations that the select board would promulgate. So they're looking at that, register. Now we're at Harwich. They're also May 4th. They're one of the 6th. Here's their budget. They're doing just shy of $1 million for the town's wastewater operating budget from available funds. Article 21, they had a capital outlay project funding and it was unused capital. So they basically want to take that unused capital from this project and they want to take it and appropriate it to the new well and water treatment plant update. They've got a citizens petition. Now, the reason why I included this is that this is something that, and even though if you see down at the bottom, it says town council states that this article violates state law and the select board is not recommending it. Basically, citizens are getting to the point where they're getting anti-40B. And this is an example of an anti-40B citizens petition that's happening. And what they wanted to do here is they wanted to make sure that if town voters would make sure pass this, it would require for any future development, including 40B housing projects, that the town would not waive fees, not reduce taxes, or provide any other discretionary financial or regulatory incentive to a private developer without prior approval by town meeting. And, the goal is to increase transparency and give residents a direct role in decisions involving discretionary benefits provided to developers. This would be a incredible mess because you can't, it's just, I'm glad that the town council states that the article violates state law because this is something where it's really trying to, I think it's an overreach and it's really, I think there's a wave of NIMBYism that's happening in certain parts of the Cape, and this is an example of that. But I wanted it's just to let you know that this is out there, and hopefully it's indefinitely postponed or voted down at a Harwich town meeting. Okay, this is the Community Preservation Act annual distributions. It's a bunch of articles together, and this is what they're vote to distribute in Harwich for FY 2027. 270,000 to the Community Housing Fund. There you've got the Lower Cape Housing Institute amount. You've got the 650,000 to the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust. And then they're doing 100,000. They're asking for 100,000 to fund the Penrose project in Chatham. And that would be 42 affordable and workforce housing units. It makes sense. Chatham's right next door to Howard. 100,000 to fund the Penrose project on Main Street in Chatham. That's 48 affordable and workforce housing units. And then they also want about 36,000 to basically provide tools and basically replace the equipment for their water quality testing because they want to be able to continue monitoring the ponds, estuaries, and harbors in Harwich. And then they also, this is again, is this a housekeeping situation here with the articles, even though it's a 2/3 majority? They're looking to amend the zoning bylaw to add the protected use ADUs, which was passed in the Affordable Homes Act. So these are just making sure that they're taking the language that's in the Affordable Homes Act and making sure that it is in sync with what the ADU bylaw is for Harwich. So basically, one of the things they're removing here is that Harwich had a requirement for owner occupancy in the primary unit and requiring an affordable deed restriction. That no longer, due to the state requirement, is no longer available to have as a restriction in Harwich. We're in Mashpee, May 4th. They go right away to borrowing authority request. Basically, they're looking to, this is by again, because it's the request of money, that it's going to be an override 2/3 majority, and it's also going to town ballot question for the town to vote on at their election. Basically, they're looking to borrow $12 million for the design of wastewater collection, treatment, and effluent recharge initiatives in the town of Mashpee for their quiet, and I'm sorry, I just butchered this, Bay watershed. So that's what they're doing there. They're moving ahead a lot with their comprehensive watershed nitrogen management plan. Here's their community preservation requests. They're asking for 222,000 and 565,000 to fund the siding, window, and door replacement project at the Mashpee Housing Authority Homer Village. This is a senior living center and it needs help. And this money is coming from the undesignated reserves. And basically it's to provide for the structural integrity of the complex, and that's what's important to do. They have the second article on this is that they're asking town voters to distribute $500,000 to the Mashpee Affordable Housing Trust. And next, this is interesting with Mashpee, to that the fact they have two articles and they basically it's regarding their water enterprise fund and the annual participation in the Aquafund program. The Aquafund program is actually something that Barnstable County does. But if you see here, first off, they want to do a levy of about $2 million to fund the operational budget of the enterprise fund. Article 23 is very interesting because they're the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. They go into the fact that the town of Mashpee has been working with the Clean Water Trust to assist with failed Title V systems in creating a loans program since 1998. That's before the Aquafund program existed. They were actually working with the precursor to that program. So what they did is they were kind of ahead of the curve on that. Basically, they had what $5.5 million as coming from the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. And to pay for those loans, the loans are available to homeowners at 5% interest to cover any ongoing costs of the program. They're secured by a betterment assessed by the town on the property being improved. This is not had anything to do with sewer. This is actually about septic systems, which is interesting. So basically, they have to reauthorize their participation in this community septic management program every year. So therefore, this is what they're doing. And wait a minute, I see some things in the chat. Hold on a second. Sorry, this is looking at the chat. Oh, sorry, never mind. I thought there was somebody who had a question. So anyway, this is something that they've done. It's a loan program so that they can actually help people with the replacement of septic system in Mashpee. It's been going on since 1998, and every year they have to reauthorize it. So that's what they're doing with these two articles and pay for it too. They are looking at short-term rental bylaw here with two-thirds majority. Some towns have done a short-term rental bylaw as a general bylaw, which is a simple majority. Some are doing it as a zoning bylaw. This is a zoning bylaw short-term rental article. So, but there's an interesting piece in it. So here you have, they want to amend the bylaws to authorize short-term rental of a residential home as a primary use for those properties that have received a rental certificate from the town prior to May 4th, 2026. So before town meeting, if you have a rental certificate, they want to make sure that it's a primary use is the short-term rental. So, and what they're looking at is, and what they're styling this is that I think they've looked at what's happened in Nantucket, so they're trying to do a way to avoid being sued on in the way Nantucket had been. So they wanted to provide a clear definition of short-term rentals, and they authorize a principal use of a home for short-term rentals in residential district 3, residential 5, commercial district 1, and commercial district 2. So those are the areas where you can have a short-term rental. That's the first piece of it. The second piece, which I find interesting, and I'm interested to see how this goes, is that for all properties that have not received a rental certificate by town meeting, their short-term rental is only eligible as an accessory use. And the accessory use and the definition of that was the crux of the lawsuit in Nantucket, which, by the way, caused Nantucket to have a special town meeting to just declare short-term rentals are allowed by right throughout the island. So here's what they're doing, and they're going to have a determination of whether a short-term rental is incident and subordinate to and on the same lot as a principal use. Basically, what's going to happen if there's some kind of argument about it, it's going to have to go to the building commissioner to make the determination whether or not it's an accessory use. Most likely it would be challenged. Then it goes to the ZBA. This is what happened in Nantucket. And if further appealed, land court. So I think what they're just trying to do is they're trying to lock in all the short-term rentals that they have currently by the town meeting. They're authorized and they're expressly allowed to go, but they're leaving kind of open on what's going to happen with short-term rentals after May 4th. So I'm going to be very interested in diving into this a little bit more once, if this passes and what this means. So there'll probably be on the second piece of this, there'll probably be a legal challenge because I don't know how you can have primary use and then suddenly say something's an accessory use. So more to come on that, but wanted to let you know what Mashpee's doing. And now we're at Bourne. The Bourne Town meeting is May 4th. It's Article 4 is to show that they're spending and raising 15.3 million to be expended for the operation of the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department. A lot of people, just to remind you, on one side of the canal, Bourne has a sewer system. On the other side, they do not. And that's what they're working on with their nitrogen sensitive areas, trying to figure out if they expand the sewer to the Cape side. Are they going to do IA systems? But they basically have filed a notice of intent. So they're going to put together something. But this will be mainly for, my understanding, is the sewer treatment center that's on the other side of the canal for Bourne. They've got a capital A, Article 5 is capital outlay funding. Basically, they're looking for sewer upgrades, and that'll be about 732,000. They've got their Community Preservation Act requests. There's 3 articles here. I've compiled them all together. Basically, $100,000 to housing assistance for that emergency homeless shelter that Brewster has done. See if they'll also do $111,500 for the To the Born Housing Partnership and Boredom Housing Trust for various housing initiatives. And their Article 20 is they brought in about $2 million from their CPA revenues for the year. And so their distribution that we talked about in the beginning, that 10%, they're going to get the community housing part of it will get 214,611 and 34 cents annual distribution in Bourne. And the last thing too is Article 8, two-thirds majority for their zoning bylaw. Again, what's the zoning bylaw? Usually you have to do a two-thirds majority. And this just takes the protected use language in the state regulations about protected use ADUs. And the town is now syncing it up with their zoning bylaw.
Yeah,
Can I help you?
yeah,
Is that a question?
it could be like the internet went off.
Uh,
I think it's just Danielle.
Oh, Danielle, could you mute, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah.
Dennis Town Meeting,
A couple
May
times.
5th. Now we've gone off of May 4th, we're now on May 5th, and Dennis is going to have their town meeting at the DY Intermediate Middle School in Yarmouth at 7 p.m. it starts. Wastewater funding, they're doing about 275,000 here. Their community preservation fund distribution for 2027. It's basically they would like to have 193,000 and some change for community housing. And their appropriation that they got, or their distribution that they got from the surcharge in the state was about 1.15 million. So there we go. They are also there with Brewster. Dennis is now going to see whether or not their town will accept a seasonal community designation. We've gone over this, and so I won't go into it again, but if they come, there'll be two more towns, excuse me, not people, that would be added to the community seasonal designation if passed. Sandwich Town meeting, May 6th. It's going to be at the high school at 7 o'clock. Article 11 is their water infrastructure investment fund. Like Eastham, they have their investment fund. So they're looking to see if the town will appropriate $1.6 million from the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund to be expended under the direction of the Board of Selectmen. This is just basically to continue implementing the town's comprehensive water resources management plan. So that's what they're looking to do. They're moving along with that. Here's their community preservation fund distribution. Springtown meeting, you get the community preservation fund distributions. So there's 3 articles here on it. The annual, forgive me. I went right into it. It's not Sandwich, that's Sandwich. Change the color. Forgive me, it's Wellfleet. And Wellfleet's town meeting is May 11th. It's at the Wellfleet Elementary School gym at 6 p.m. Here's their community preservation distributions. They're getting a little over $1 million in Wellfleet for 2027. Their housing distribution will be $105,967. And for out of that total, though, for about $42,000 is going to be used for Maurice Bond debt service. Maurice Campground is a 21-acre property that was a campground, and it was sold to the town of Wellfleet for about $6.5 million. And so that is the bond service that they have on that. Wellfleet is looking to turn that, and you'll see in some of the articles, turn that into housing, and it's controversial. And so, but back to community preservation distributions, Article 21, $670,000 for community housing. And they can use this for housing assistance programs by executing grants as needed. And then $10,000 to the Lower Cape Housing Institute. Here's the articles. Now, as I said, Marie's Campground Housing Plan, there's a couple citizens petitions. It's controversial. It's a very large property. It's had a lot it's had a lot of campers there, and basically you'll see in the next article that the select board has a master plan that they passed through they've vetted it through a lot of public outreach, through design and things. And this is actually the result of people to kind of the backlash to it. So if passed, Articles 26, it's asking voters to instruct the select board, acting on behalf of the town, for Maurice's Campground to include any lease, deed, disposition agreement, or development agreement for said property as a requirement of that not less than 50% of the total dwelling units constructed be offered as year-round ownership housing, included but not limited to condominiums, cooperatives, or any other ownership forms, with the remaining dwelling units permitted as rental housing. It's not a bad thing, but then again, what they're doing is they're saying this is what you need, and the question is that what you need, which this sounds really good, but the question is, would that work with a developer? We don't know, but that's what they're looking to do. And what's nice, though, I have to say, is that they're trying to make sure that as much of the housing that they have is, one, you can have home ownership, two, it's year-round housing, as well as affordable housing. So it could be missing middle. Article 27 asks town voters to require the select board to submit to town meeting any final development agreement, long-term lease, or disposition agreement pertaining to Maurice's Campground. This may or not be, the town council may say that that violates state law. We're not sure, but that's Article 27. Again, people are kind of having a backlash to what they consider to be overly large development. Okay. This is Article 28 is a home rule seasonal communities dedicated employing housing categories. As we said before, that the seasonal communities allows you to, right now, if you're a seasonal community, you can build for municipal employees. So that's police, firefighters, EMTs. It's also municipal staff, and it's also for teachers. And given the fact that, especially in Wellfleet, shell fishermen are an integral part of their municipality, and it's a very big industry that they have, they're asking a home rule petition to add shell fishermen and other aquaculture workers as a preferred vocation category for affordable and attainable housing. It's a great idea, and Wellfleet, I hope that it goes. Most likely what will happen is that Senator Sear will take that under advisement, and then he'll work to change the legislation itself rather than a home rule petition. And I know right now there is a act related to seasonal community where he's looking to add categories for healthcare workers, childcare providers, nonprofit workers. So perhaps this can also be added to it. But hats off to Wellfleet for thinking outside the box and looking out for their residents, and also an important industry to the town. Article 30 expands eligibility threshold for affordable housing trust. Basically, it's just increasing the affordable housing trust maximum to be 250% of the area median income. So that's what they're trying to do there. And here it is, what we talked about, a campground master plan. This is a non-binding advisory only article, and they're just asking the town voters to say whether or not they really like the master plan that the select board passed. And basically what the master plan right now have is 250 year-round homes with 175 affordable rental units, home ownership units at various income levels up to 200% of area median income, 80 to 90 seasonal worker beds in a dormitory style housing. The plan has 15,000 square foot of community and commercial space, substantial open space preservation, and then also advanced on-site wastewater treatment size to also serve neighboring properties. So this development in the plan would be phased over approximately 10 years, with construction starting at 2028. Depending on the outcome of this vote, the select board will figure out what the next step is about Maurice's Campground. If it passes, they'll continue with this. If it doesn't pass, then I think they're going to be back to the drawing board. They're also doing a general bylaw. Forgive me, I said Brewster and Mashpee, I forgot Wellfleet. And it's a general bylaw, so it's a majority, not 2/3 needed. And here's the highlights. You have to register with DOR and the building department to get a certificate. This gives a date when the rental applications are due, March 1st per calendar year. And then the certificates expire on December 31st. So you have to re-up every year. The select board's going to set the certificate fee. And you've seen this in other, this next bullet you've seen in other short-term rental bylaws. The owner must comply with all inspections, town codes, bylaws, and state laws to remain eligible. They're allowing 3 rental certificates are the limit. Exemptions exist for current owners with 4 or more. The maximum capacity they're putting here is 2 people per bedroom. A contact person is required, and the owner must post all safety rules in the unit. And the prohibition on short-term rentals is no corporate ownership. You cannot have a short-term rental in an ADU, and income restricted dwellings. So that's the bylaw for short-term rentals in Wellfleet. Now we're at Chatham, May 11th. It's in the Monomoy Middle School at 6 p.m. Article 32. This is appropriation from the Attainable Housing Special Revenue Fund. It's a attainable ownership housing at Stepping Stones Road. They have an attainable housing special review fund that was created by the town of Chatham for missing middle attainable home ownership. So they're going to see if the town will vote to transfer 2.1 million from the receipts that are reserved in the Attainable Housing Special Review Fund for subsidizing the development of attainable ownership housing at town-owned property at Stepping Stones Road. A lot of times the reason why you have to have this is because for affordable housing projects, which is 80% AMI and under, there are state and federal tax benefit breaks. There are none if you are building something for missing middle at this point in time. So that's what they're asking is 2.1 million. 1% of the room tax received by Chatham are dedicated to this fund to help for attainable housing. The Stepping Stones development would consist of 14 ownership homes, of which 10 are attainable and 4 are affordable. I mean, they're thinking outside the box, and good job, Chatham. Article 33. This is someone who passed away has decided that they, in their will, that they wanted to bequeath their estate to the town. So it's actually, and so see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to accept for the town a bequest for the estate of the late Priscilla Ford of her land at 63 George Ryder Road. So under the terms of her will, she's devised that her property located at that address will go to the town of Chatham for use by the town for affordable housing purposes. The town may keep the property, or they could sell it at market rate and use the sale proceeds for affordable housing purposes. She's a wonderful woman. She was a wonderful woman. Chatham, home rule petition. Basically here what they're doing is when it comes to year-round deed restrictions, right now there is a limit of 30 years. So if you did a year-round deed restriction, you'd have that house as year-round housing for 30 years, and then after that it expires. So this home rule petition would enable Chatham to hold year-round housing occupancy restrictions and attainable housing restrictions in perpetuity by including them and granting them the same benefits of the other restrictions in Mass General Law with Chapter 184, Section 31. It's basically what this is, and I'll go, those restrictions that are in there, there are certain restrictions that exist in state law that allow the deed restriction to be held in perpetuity. If you look at the second bullet, it's conservation restrictions, historic preservation restrictions, agricultural preservation restrictions, watershed preservation restrictions, and affordable housing restrictions. What Chatham wants to do is to ask the legislature to give them that ability to basically have year-round deed restrictions held in perpetuity. It's a great idea. I know that Senator Sears is looking at it, and this home rule petition is something that I think would be very helpful. If not just for Chatham, if it could be helpful for the whole region as a whole. And Chatham is going to start, this is an appropriation from their special review fund for lease to locals. The lease to locals program, let's see, they want to take 312,500 from their receipts that they have to fund a Chatham lease to locals program. The lease to locals program would provide rental subsidies to short-term rental property owners to incentivize year-round rental opportunities for qualified attainable income households. Provincetown currently does this, Easton is doing it, and Orleans is doing that, and Chatham is now joining us with wanting to do that. The goal of the program, if passed, is to increase the supply of long-term rental housing available to residents and local employees by closing the financial gap between rent a property owner receives with a short-term rental and a year-round rental. Also, besides Provincetown, East End, and Orleans, Chilmark on the Vineyard also has a lease to local program. So that's where they're going. Here's their Community Preservation Act distributions. They would like to have $150,000 go to community housing for that 10% requirement that we talked about at the beginning of the slides. They want to appropriate $750,000 to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that'll help with affordable home ownership units at Stepping Stones Road. So they're putting money into the missing middle housing, and this will now put money into the affordable housing part for Stepping Stones Road. $20,000 to the Lower Cape Housing Institute, and $101,000 to fund the Meeting House affordable housing development. That is also, and the $400,000 for the Main Street affordable workforce housing development. Those last two bullets are the Penrose projects that you also saw Harwich asking to provide money for from their Community Preservation Act. This again, to zoning bylaw change, 2/3 majority, and they're looking again to take the Chatham Town Meeting, the Chatham Town ADU bylaw and sync it with the requirements that the state has for protected ADUs. So there we go. This is also this Article 53, 54, and 55. These are also based on the HERO Act that we talked about. So here we go. This article allows, 53 would allow disabled veterans to claim exemptions from homes held in a trust, provided they are a trustee or a beneficiary. That's something that I think a lot of other towns will look at. Article 54 would enable the town to provide an annual inflation-adjusted property tax exemption for eligible local veterans and their surviving spouses based on the cost of living index. It would provide support to 63 qualified veterans in their town. And then Article 55, this would allow a exemption for a disabled veteran and their surviving spouse for whom Chatham is their legal domicile, gives it a 100% increase in their exemption amount if they're a disabled vet. Very thoughtful. And that's what's on the, hopefully those things pass. We support them. Now we're on Orleans. They're also May 11th. They're at the Nauset Middle School at 6 p.m. They are also making great strides with wastewater management plan implementation. They're going to see if the town will appropriate $2.7 million to keep funding the administration of the amended comprehensive wastewater management plan there. And basically, it would include the survey, preliminary design, cost estimating, and the state revolving fund application for services for their phase 4, which is the Orleans sewer study area. It'll be engineering support services for them for planning, public outreach, and meeting and execution of the town's wastewater management program. And then Article 26 is to fund additional costs for their phase 3 lakes and ponds sewer collection system construction. So basically, they're looking to appropriate $2.5 million to fund the additional costs for phase 3 associated with the construction of their lakes and ponds sewer area collection system and pumping station project. So basically, the bids for this phase 3 will be received prior to town meeting. So the funding under this article will only be used if the bids that were received for this exceed the prior funding authorization. This is another insurance policy, if you will. In other words, if the bids that are coming in for phase 3, because phase 3's cost more than may cost more than what they've appropriated, they'll have an extra $2.5 million to make sure that things are paid for. And Orleans is also looking, this is their community preservation budget distributions. $10,000 to the Lower Cape Housing Institute, $300,000 to the Orleans Affordable Housing Trust, and the total CPA funds that are available that they have for 2027 was about $2.3 million. Article 31, fund water quality testing and monitoring. So basically they're looking to ask town voters to support $215 for water quality monitoring. The monitoring would go on at Lonnie's Pond Oyster Program, the Cedar Pond Restoration Program, and the Namscachet Marsh have required monitoring for regulatory compliance. Additional work in Cedar Pond is needed to address bottom nutrients that annually degrade the water quality. And there's an alum treatment in Baker Pond that is planned to safeguard water quality. That alum treatment is, I think, the same thing that Mashpee uses, and it helps with phosphorus that's in the water. Article 28. It's the same. Sorry about that. I just had two slides in there. And we are done. Any questions? I'm going to stop share. Like to know. Thank you all for coming. Are there any questions anybody has?
I don't have anything in the Q&A, Leslie, and nor in the chat. We will be sending out the slides and this recording via email and any resources that Leslie would like to include in the presentation.
I wanted to again thank you all for taking time. Great day. And if you have any further questions, we will be sending out this presentation and my email is on that and happy to help with anything. Thank you all for taking time today with us.